the EU realizes it can't rely on America for protection. Now it has a blueprint for a new joint military force. This migrant crisis, in which Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko stands accused of directing refugees to the Polish border, took place as fears ramped up in Eastern Europe over a buildup of Russian troops on Ukraine's border. Recent geopolitical crises, most notably the messy withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, has cemented thinking that the EU cannot rely entirely on the United States or NATO for its protection. The main proposal is that the EU obtains the capacity to rapidly deploy up to 5,000 troops to deal with numerous potential crises. Rather than a permanent force reporting to a commander in Brussels, these rapid deployment groups will be a collection of troops from across the participating member states, formed to tackle a specific task and commanded from an EU level on that mission. Those tasks could range from an evacuation mission, such as in Afghanistan, to peacekeeping on a border or humanitarian missions.
The document also talks about the need for a joined-up approach in defense procurement, research, and intelligence, making the bloc more competitive and efficient. It acknowledges that to do this, national and EU spending would have to increase and focus on filling in the gaps that currently exist across the EU as a whole. Not all 27 EU countries would be required to participate, however. Deploying troops in the name of the EU would require sign-off and involvement of member states, and the details of how this would work are yet to be confirmed. While Eurosceptic derision at the idea of an EU army means this latest proposal is a far cry from the 1999 goal of up to 60,000 troops ready to deploy at any given moment, it's still ambitious and, unusually for a top-down, multilateral EU proposal, is broadly supported by all 27 member states. However, these are early days, and reaching agreement on anything costly from 27 countries who face vastly different security and fiscal concerns will be far from straightforward. The broad picture is that everyone agrees on the central point: something must be done if Europe is to be kept safe. The keenest country is without question France. President Emmanuel Macron has made no secret of his dream for a stronger Europe with greater integration on foreign affairs. He has even called for a real European army to reduce Europe's need for US-led NATO protection. The current aim is that the strategic compass gets agreed in March, while France holds the EU's rotating presidency. But Macron might want to stick the champagne on ice, as many of his European counterparts are less gung-ho when it comes to defense. At present, the document does address the EU's deteriorating relationship with its neighbor, but also says common interests and a shared culture in fact link the EU and Russia, and that it would still engage with Russia in some specific issues on which we have shared priorities. Eastern states have also expressed concern about any plan that would undermine NATO. Similarly worried about Russia are the Scandinavians. Diplomats and officials from these countries explained that we are at real risk from Russia in this part of the world, and made clear that the transatlantic alliance needs to be strengthened as part of any broader EU plan. Multiple officials, diplomats, and politicians said they believed that Macron was the main sticking point, reluctant to point the finger at Russia. However, officials from some of these countries expressed concern that troops assigned to rapid deployment teams would never be used, that action would be vetoed, and the whole thing would end up a waste of money that undermined the NATO and undercut the transatlantic alliance. The final piece of the puzzle is Germany. The EU's richest country is still negotiating its next coalition government, and officials say that it's very hard to predict exactly how hawkish Berlin will be in the coming year. Despite all the potential pitfalls, there is sincere optimism that these differences can be bridged if everyone gets realistic and serious. Roza Chepnevishin, a member of the European Parliament and Lithuania's former defense minister, says that only the EU is able to solve the hybrid threats it faces from hostile actors in Russia and China. However, she expresses concern that if the bloc cannot agree on issues ranging from cybersecurity, military capability, a more realistic view of Russia and, above all, spending, then it will just be like Greta Thunberg says, just blah blah blah. Former Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb believes that Brussels' renewed enthusiasm for security is timely, important, and realistic. The US is not going to back up European security forever. He says that if Europe is to get serious about protecting itself, it needs to understand that the line between war and peace is blurred. Soft power has been weaponized and become hard power. We see that with asylum seekers being used as weapons. We see with information, trade, energy, and vaccines being used as weapons. The EU has largely been applauded for the sincere scope of its ambition, and analysts hope they can reach a meaningful agreement on one of the trickiest issues in European diplomacy. Valina Chakarova, director of the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy, acknowledges that finding consensus will be a long process but can see positive movement. Once it is approved, there will be concrete directions in which the EU and the member states should go when it comes to forging partnerships and alliances, enhancing capabilities, creating resilience in key domains and sectors, and finally achieving rapid and efficient crisis management based on shared strategic assessment of common threats. And politics is so often what ruins Brussels' best-laid plans. Steven Blockmans, director of research at the Center for European Policy Studies, says that for the rubber to hit the road, member states will have to set aside their domestic concerns of blood and treasure and let common security interests prevail. Any single member state could therefore delay or veto deployment for so-called vital national security concerns. For all the positive sounds now, it is entirely possible that once all 27 leaders get locked in a room to discuss this proposal, naked national interest and previous gripes take over and this plan gets watered down or shelved. And while the top brass in Brussels remains optimistic that this plan is enough of a compromise to avoid such petulance, when there's this much money on the table and political capital at stake, diplomacy, compromise, and unity can easily go out the window. Which, for the EU, would hardly be the first time.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.